The great arena of Z-Bar Prime was filled with light, noise, and endless laughter. Thousands of aliens sat in the high seats, their strange eyes glowing, their sharp teeth showing as they mocked and joked. The center of the arena was covered in sand, broken stones, and massive iron machines built to test strength. This was not just a game, it was a public trial, a humiliation, and the victim chosen was a human. His name was Captain Daniel Ward. He walked slowly into the arena, his boots pressing into the sand, his face calm, but his heart beating hard inside his chest. Above him, banners of alien houses waved in the hot wind, each symbol declaring power, pride, and domination. Aliens shouted loudly, their voices mixing into a wave of insults. Look at the human, they laughed, so small, so weak, so fragile. The alien commander sat in a golden seat at the very front, his armor shining, his long claws tapping against the metal armrest. He was known as Vurok the Unbroken, a leader who had never lost in combat. Vurok raised one claw, and the arena became silent. His voice echoed like thunder across the walls. Today, we show the galaxy what humans really are, nothing but soft creatures, weak bones, and empty pride. The crowd cheered, their laughter shaking the ground. Daniel did not reply. He stood in the center, his eyes scanning the machines, the boulders, the weights, the dual weapons lined in a row. He knew what this was. It was not a contest, it was a message. The aliens wanted to prove that humans could never stand among the great species of the galaxy. This was not about him alone. It was about his people, his world, his entire race. An alien guard stepped forward, carrying a massive stone as large as a man. With a roar, he dropped it onto the ground before Daniel. The alien champion, a beast-like warrior with muscles like steel, stepped forward to demonstrate. With one hand, he lifted the stone high into the air, spinning it before throwing it down with a crash. The arena roared with laughter and cheers. "Let the human try," they shouted. "Let him break his fragile bones." Daniel stepped closer. The stone looked heavy, heavier than anything he had ever lifted. He could feel the eyes of the galaxy burning into him, waiting for his failure. For a moment, he closed his eyes, and in that silence, he remembered Earth. He remembered his training, the long nights of sweat and pain, the voices of his comrades telling him never to give up. He remembered his father's words, "Strength is not in the body, Daniel, it is in the will." Opening his eyes, Daniel placed his hands on the cold surface of the stone. He tightened his grip, feeling the rough edges cut into his skin. The crowd laughed louder, shouting cruel words. But Daniel did not listen. He bent his knees, his muscles straining, and began to lift. The stone moved, just a little, but enough to silence the laughter. Daniel's teeth pressed hard, his arms shaking, sweat sliding down his face. But slowly, inch by inch, the stone rose higher. The aliens gasped, some standing from their seats in disbelief. Daniel lifted the stone above his shoulders, holding it steady for all to see. For the first time, the arena grew quiet. The mocking voices were gone, replaced with stunned silence. Daniel dropped the stone with a heavy crash, the dust rising around him like smoke. He stood tall, breathing hard but calm, his eyes locked on Commander Vurok. Not a single word left his mouth, but the message was clear. Vurok narrowed his eyes, his claws digging into the armrest of his throne. The commander had expected weakness, but what he saw was something dangerous. The aliens shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. The mockery had been broken, and in its place grew something unfamiliar. It was not respect, not yet, but it was fear. Daniel looked at the crowd. He saw their glowing eyes, their sharp teeth, their cruel faces. But he also saw cracks in their arrogance, cracks he had created with nothing but his will. The challenge had only begun, and he knew the hardest tests were still waiting. Yet he stood ready. He was one man against the galaxy, and he would not fall. The silence in the arena lasted only a moment. Then the laughter came back, louder and sharper than before. The aliens could not accept what they had seen. They told themselves it was a trick, an accident, or just luck. The alien crowd began to mock again, their voices rising like thunder. "Lift a stone, and you think you are strong," one shouted. "Humans are only good at pretending," another laughed. The cruel jeers rained down on Daniel, but he stood silent, his breathing steady, his eyes calm. He knew the laughter was a weapon, a storm of noise meant to break his spirit. But he did not bend. The alien commander, Vurak, leaned forward on his throne, his voice carrying across the arena like iron. "Do not cheer for this human," he said. "He is nothing. His strength is only a shadow. His body will break in the next trial." His words poured fuel onto the fire of alien mockery. The crowd laughed again, waving their claws, stamping their feet against the ground. The arena shook with their contempt. Another alien warrior stepped forward, this one larger and darker than the first, his body covered in thick armor plates that shined under the lights. In his hands, he carried two metal bars connected to a massive weight. This was no simple stone. It was the test of true endurance, a trial made to crush even the strongest. The alien warrior lifted the weight easily, holding it above his head as the crowd roared. He stood there for a few moments, smiling, then dropped it with a crash that shook the sand. He pointed at Daniel, his voice full of pride. "Now, let the human try. Let us see his bones snap under the weight." Daniel walked forward, his eyes never leaving the heavy bars. He could hear the mocking voices, feel the heat of alien eyes burning into his skin. But inside him, there was only silence. He wrapped his hands around the cold steel, the weight almost pulling him down before he even lifted. The crowd laughed louder, already certain of his failure. Daniel bent his knees, his muscles pulling tight. The weight began to rise slowly, almost unwillingly. Every inch felt like fire tearing through his arms. Sweat ran down his face, his teeth pressed hard, but still he lifted. The laughter began to fade as the bars rose higher. Soon the weight was above his head, shaking in his trembling hands. The arena went quiet once again, shock spreading like a wave. Daniel stood there, holding the impossible weight as if his will alone kept it from crushing him. The alien stared, unable to understand. The champion who had lifted it before had done it with ease, but he had not held it long. Daniel was not only lifting, he was enduring, his spirit refusing to give in. The weight pressed down on him like the sky itself. His muscles burned, his arms shook violently, his vision blurred with pain. But still he did not drop it. Every second that passed was a victory, every moment a strike against the arrogance of the galaxy. The silence of the crowd turned into whispers, whispers that spread like fire. "Impossible," some said. "No human should have this strength," others muttered. The alien commander's face darkened, his claws cutting into the metal of his throne. He had expected Daniel to fall quickly, humiliated before all. But instead, he watched a human stand in defiance, carrying a weight no one believed he could bear. At last, with a roar from deep inside his chest, Daniel threw the weight down, the crash echoing across the arena. He dropped to one knee, gasping, his arms shaking with exhaustion, but his spirit unbroken. For a long moment, no one spoke, the crowd of thousands frozen in disbelief. Then the whispers grew louder, turning into shouts, turning into anger. The aliens did not cheer. They could not accept what they had seen. Their mocking voices grew louder, almost desperate. They laughed and shouted, trying to bury their fear under noise. But Daniel rose to his feet again, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with quiet fire. He looked up at the commander's throne, his voice calm. "Is this your truth?" he asked. "Is this what you call strength?" The arena fell silent once more. The mockery had turned loud, but under that laughter, something else had begun to rise. It was doubt, and it was fear. The arena floor trembled as the alien drums began to beat again. The crowd, restless and uneasy, tried to recover from the shock they had just witnessed. They shouted and laughed, but their voices cracked, their confidence shaken. Vurak the commander raised one claw, silencing them once more. His golden eyes burned with anger as he stood from his throne. "This human is only surviving by tricks," Vurak declared, his voice echoing across the stone walls. "Strength is not measured by chance. It is proven in combat." The crowd cheered again, their fear hidden behind forced laughter. The commander pointed to the gates at the far end of the arena. "Bring forth the champion," he ordered. The great doors opened with a deep rumble, chains clanking as if a beast was being released. From the shadows stepped an alien warrior unlike the others. He was taller than Daniel by 2 heads, his body wrapped in heavy armor made from living scales that moved like breathing metal. His 4 arms carried weapons, 2 long spears and 2 curved blades that glistened under the arena lights. The crowd exploded with noise, chanting his name. "Korik, Korik, Korik." Daniel watched him approach, his body already aching from the weight he had lifted earlier. Sweat still clung to his skin, his muscles screamed, but his eyes did not waver. He knew this was the true test, not a trial of stones or steel, but of life itself. If he lost now, humanity would be seen as weak forever. If he won, the galaxy would never laugh the same way again. Korik circled him, growling low, his 4 arms moving like snakes. "You are small," Korik hissed. "Your bones will break like glass." The crowd cheered at his words, their laughter filling the air like knives. But Daniel did not answer. He simply raised his fists, his stance firm, his breathing steady. He knew words could not win here, only action. The commander roared, "Begin." Korik charged forward with impossible speed, his spears striking like lightning. Daniel dodged the first strike, barely avoiding the spearhead that cut the air beside his face. The second spear came low, aiming for his legs. Daniel jumped aside, the weapon striking sand and sending dust into the air. The crowd roared with laughter again. They saw Daniel's dodges as weakness, as fear. But Daniel was studying, watching every movement of Korik's body, every rhythm of his strikes. He could see the alien's arrogance, the way he underestimated him. That arrogance was Daniel's weapon. Korik swung one of his curved blades, the metal flashing toward Daniel's chest. Daniel ducked low, rolling across the sand, and came up close. For the first time, he struck back. His fist slammed into Korik's stomach with all the strength he had. The alien staggered, surprise flashing in his golden eyes. The crowd gasped, their laughter choking in their throats. They had not expected the human to fight back. Daniel pressed forward, striking again and again, not with the power of size, but with precision and speed. Every blow landed where the alien's armor was weakest. Every strike carried the weight of human will. Korik roared in fury, his 4 arms swinging wildly now. He attacked with rage, smashing the ground, cutting the air, but Daniel moved with focus. He did not fight like a beast, he fought like a soldier. Every dodge, every step, every strike was calculated. The crowd could see it. The human was not just surviving, he was winning. The commander's face darkened with rage. He leaned forward, claws scraping the armrest of his throne. This was not how it was meant to go. The mockery was turning into silence once more, and silence was dangerous. Finally, Daniel caught one of the alien spears as it came down. With a roar, he twisted it free and drove the wooden shaft into the sand, using it as leverage. He spun around, slamming his shoulder into Korik's chest. The massive alien stumbled backward, crashing into the ground with a thunder that shook the arena. The crowd was frozen, their mouths open, their laughter gone. Daniel stood over the fallen warrior, chest heaving, eyes burning. He had done the impossible again. One human, standing tall against the galaxy's strongest. And still he had not fallen. The arena floor was cracked where Korik had fallen, the dust rising like smoke around his huge body. The crowd of aliens sat frozen, their laughter swallowed by disbelief. For the first time, silence had defeated the sound of mockery. But Vurak the commander did not allow it to last. He stood from his throne, his voice cutting the silence like a blade. "This is not over," he roared. "Strength is more than striking an enemy. It is endurance. It is lasting when the body cries for surrender." His words shook the air, and the crowd, desperate to believe him, cheered once more. Their voices returned, though weaker than before. Vurak raised a claw and pointed toward the center of the arena. "Bring out the test of the unbroken machine," he ordered. With a grinding of chains and metal, the ground split open. From beneath the sand rose a massive device of iron and stone. It was shaped like two pillars connected by a heavy bar, and at its end hung weights so large they made the sand tremble. This machine was designed to test endurance, to drag down the strongest until their arms gave out and their bones snapped. Even the alien champions had failed after minutes, their strength burned away by its endless weight. The crowd cheered, comforted by the sight of the machine. "This will break him," one shouted. "No human can last even a breath," another laughed. The noise grew louder, feeding on their hope that the human would finally fail. Daniel walked toward the machine, his body aching from the fight. His arms still burned, his chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. But his eyes never wavered. He placed his hands on the iron bar, cold and rough beneath his fingers. He knew what this was, he knew what they wanted. They wanted to see him collapse, humiliated, broken in front of the galaxy. The alien warrior who had demonstrated earlier stepped forward. With a roar, he pulled down the bar, his muscles bulging, his body straining. For a few seconds he held it, but then the weights pulled him down. The machine snapped back, throwing him aside like a rag. The crowd laughed and cheered, proud of their champion even in failure. Now it was Daniel's turn. He gripped the bar, bent his knees, and pulled. The weight resisted, fighting him with every inch. His teeth pressed together, his arms shook, but slowly the bar began to move. The crowd laughed at first, waiting for him to drop it in seconds. But seconds passed, then more seconds, and still Daniel held on. His muscles screamed in pain. Sweat poured from his skin. His arms felt like fire, his bones like they would shatter. But his grip did not loosen, his back did not bend. The bar pulled against him with the force of mountains, but still he held. The crowd grew quiet again, the laughter fading into whispers. Minutes passed. The alien warriors who had once mocked now leaned forward in disbelief. They had all failed this test quickly, but the humans still endured. Daniel's vision blurred. His breathing came like thunder, but he refused to let go. He remembered the voices of his comrades, the nights of training, the battles survived. He remembered why he was here, not for himself, but for Earth, for humanity, for every human who could not stand here today. The machine groaned as if alive, trying to break him, but Daniel roared back, his cry echoing louder than the crowd. His veins bulged, his muscles shook violently, but he refused to kneel. He stood like a wall against the crushing weight. The whispers in the arena grew into fear. Some aliens stared wide-eyed, their claws trembling. This was no illusion, no trick. This was willpower. At last, Daniel released the bar, letting it snap back with a crash that shook the ground. His arms dropped to his sides, trembling and burning, but he remained standing. The silence that followed was deeper than before. Tens of thousands of aliens stared at one human, their voices stolen by the truth they had seen. Daniel looked up at the commander, his chest heaving, his voice rough but steady. "You measure strength in muscle," he said, "but true strength is never giving up." The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. Vurak's face twisted in rage, his claws cutting into the armrest of his throne. The crowd did not laugh, they could not. They had seen something greater than raw power. They had seen the strength of a human spirit. The arena floor was still shaking from the crash of the endurance machine. Dust swirled in the air like smoke after a battlefield. The crowd of aliens sat stunned, their laughter broken, their voices lost. They had seen the human last longer than their champions. They had seen him endure when no one else could. But Vurak the commander would not allow silence to rule his arena. He stood, his golden armor flashing under the bright lights, his claws raised high. "This is not strength," he roared, his voice echoing. "Strength is not holding a machine. Strength is breaking an enemy." The crowd, desperate to believe their leader, cheered again, though their voices trembled with doubt. Vurak pointed his claw at Daniel, his face twisted with fury. "Face a true warrior in combat. Human," he commanded, "and let the galaxy see you fall." The great gates opened once more, and another alien warrior entered the arena. This one was not just strong, he was trained, a soldier of the highest order. His armor was black and red, his weapon a massive war staff tipped with blades that glowed faintly blue. The crowd roared with approval, their faith returning as they saw their champion step forward. Daniel stood still, his body aching, but his eyes calm and unbroken. The alien warrior circled him, his deep voice rumbling across the sand. "You are nothing," he growled. "I will end this farce and show your people their place." Daniel said nothing, his fists tightening, his stance firm. He had fought many battles before, but never one like this. This was not just survival. This was the turning point of the entire trial. With a sudden roar, the alien lunged, his war staff cutting through the air like lightning. Daniel barely dodged, the blade slicing across his shoulder and leaving a burning line of pain. The crowd erupted with cheers, believing the fight was already over. But Daniel did not fall. He did not cry out. Instead, he steadied himself, his eyes narrowing, watching every movement, every weakness. The alien swung again, faster, heavier, his strikes powerful enough to shatter stone. Daniel moved with precision, each dodge just close enough to survive. Every strike he avoided drained the alien's energy. Every miss chipped away at his confidence. The crowd began to notice, their cheers fading into uneasy murmurs. The human was not fighting like prey. He was fighting like a hunter waiting for the right moment. Finally, Daniel struck back. As the alien brought down the staff in a heavy arc, Daniel stepped inside the swing. His fist slammed into the alien's ribs, the crack echoing across the arena. The alien staggered, his golden eyes wide with shock. The crowd gasped, the silence cutting through the air like a knife. But the alien roared, his fury exploding. He swung wildly, his staff smashing into the ground, his claws slashing through the dust. Daniel was struck across the chest, the blow knocking him backward, his body crashing into the sand. The crowd cheered again, their voices filled with desperate joy. They thought it was over, that the human would stay down. Daniel lay still for a moment, his chest burning, his breath shallow. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on him like chains. But inside, a spark refused to die. He pushed himself up, slow but steady, blood running from the cut on his chest. The crowd fell silent again, their laughter stolen by disbelief. The alien warrior charged, swinging the staff with killing force. But Daniel was ready. He caught the staff with both hands, the impact sending pain through his arms. With a roar, he twisted, ripping the weapon free and spinning it around. The alien stumbled, off balance for the first time. Daniel struck, driving the staff into the alien's stomach. Then he swung upward, smashing it against his jaw. The alien fell back, crashing into the sand, the sound echoing across the silent arena. Daniel stood over him, the war staff in his hands, his body shaking, but his eyes burning with fire. The crowd did not cheer, they did not laugh. They stared in silence at the human who refused to fall. For the first time, fear glimmered in their glowing eyes. And high above, Vurak clenched his claws, his face twisted in rage. The turning point had come. The mockery was breaking. The truth of humanity's strength was rising. The alien warrior lay on the sand, his war staff broken beside him. The arena that once roared with laughter had fallen into silence. Tens of thousands of glowing alien eyes were locked on one human. Daniel stood tall, his chest rising and falling, blood on his shoulder, sweat dripping down his face. But his grip was strong, his gaze unbroken. The silence was not ordinary. It was heavy, suffocating. Aliens shifted in their seats, their claws tapping nervously against the stone. They had come to mock, to laugh, to watch a human crawl in shame. Instead, they had seen him stand again and again. They had seen him lift what no one else could lift, endure what no one else could endure. And now, they had seen him bring down a champion. Commander Vurok rose from his throne, his golden armor blazing like fire under the lights. His voice thundered across the arena, but even he could not hide the tension in it. "This proves nothing," he roared. "The human is lucky, nothing more." But his words did not strike as before. The crowd did not answer with loud laughter. Their voices were weak, uncertain. Doubt had entered their hearts. Daniel raised his head, his voice cutting through the silence. "Luck does not last this long," he said, each word heavy with meaning. The arena stirred, whispers spreading like fire. Some aliens stared at him with anger, but others with something unfamiliar: respect. It was dangerous, for respect was something the commander feared more than laughter. Vurok's claws dug deep into his throne. He could see it in their eyes, the change, the shift. What had once been mockery was turning into belief, and belief could spread like a storm. He had to break it, or the legend of this human would grow beyond his control. "Another champion," Vurok commanded, his voice strained. But the chosen warrior hesitated, his steps slower than before. He looked at Daniel not as prey, but as a threat. The crowd saw it too, the hesitation, the fear, and the silence grew heavier. Daniel's body trembled with exhaustion, but his spirit burned brighter. Every alien could see it, even through his pain. He refused to kneel. He did not fight with size. He did not fight with claws or glowing weapons. He fought with something unseen, something no machine could measure. He fought with human will. As the new champion approached, Daniel stepped forward first. The crowd gasped, and used to seeing prey walk toward the predator. The alien warrior's eyes flickered, doubt showing in their glow. Daniel's presence, his unbroken stance, was heavier than any weight he had lifted. It pressed against them like a storm pressing against walls. The fight began, fast and brutal. The alien struck with furious power, but Daniel blocked, dodged, countered. Every strike Daniel took, he rose again. Every fall was followed by another rise. The crowd watched in disbelief. To them, a fight was always about who was strongest, who struck hardest. But here was a human showing them that strength was not the absence of pain, but the refusal to stay down. The alien warrior's rage turned into panic, his movements clumsy. Daniel's strikes grew sharper, his steps more certain. And with one final blow, he knocked the warrior down, the sand erupting beneath the fall. The crowd gasped, their whispers no longer full of mockery, but fear. The fear that their pride, their long belief in superiority, had been shattered. Some aliens lowered their heads, unable to meet Daniel's eyes. Others clenched their claws, torn between anger and respect. But one thing was clear: no one was laughing anymore. The human who had entered as prey now stood as something far greater. A challenger to the galaxy's pride, a reminder that spirit could not be crushed. Daniel looked around the arena, his voice steady though his body shook. "You thought humans weak," he said, "but weakness does not rise again. Weakness does not endure. Weakness does not win." His words echoed across the stone, sinking deep into every heart. Even those who hated him could not deny the truth. They had seen it with their own eyes. Fear had entered, but with it, a new truth was born. High above, Vurok stared down, his jaw tight, his claws trembling against the golden armrest. For the first time in his reign, he felt something he had never known before. He felt the eyes of his people turning away from him and turning toward a human. The fear in alien eyes was real, and it was only the beginning. The arena was a storm of silence. Tens of thousands of aliens sat frozen, their glowing eyes fixed on the lone human standing in the sand. Daniel's body shook with exhaustion, Blood streaked his chest, his arms heavy from battle. Yet he stood upright, tall, unbroken, his presence heavier than the weight of any stone or machine. The fallen alien warrior groaned on the ground, unable to rise. The crowd did not cheer for him. They did not mock the human. Their laughter was gone, their arrogance broken. And for the first time in the history of this arena, their fear was joined by something stranger. Respect. Commander Vurok slammed his claws against the armrest of his throne, his golden armor trembling with the force. "This is a lie," he roared, though his voice cracked. "No human can possess such strength. No human can defeat our champions." But even as he spoke, the doubt spread. The crowd's silence was proof that they no longer believed his words. Daniel raised his head, his voice carrying across the arena, without need of power or roar. "You called me weak," he said, each word steady, heavy. "You laughed at humanity. You thought our bones would break, our spirit would shatter." He took a step forward, the sand crunching under his boots. "But you were wrong." The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers spreading like fire. Aliens who once mocked now stared wide-eyed, their claws curled tight. They could not deny what they had seen. A human had endured the machine, had lifted the impossible, had fought their warriors and won. The truth was carved into the arena floor like scars in stone. Daniel lifted his hand, pointing to the galaxy beyond the high walls. "Humans are not strong because of size," he said. "We are strong because we refuse to fall, because we rise again and again, because no matter how heavy the weight, we carry it. No matter how hard the fight, we face it." His voice rang clear, echoing through the silence. "That is our truth, and now you have seen it with your own eyes." The aliens looked at one another, their glowing eyes uncertain. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others clenched their jaws in anger. But deep inside, a shift had begun. They could no longer see humanity as prey. They could no longer laugh without remembering the human who stood unbroken. Vurok snarled, his claws tearing grooves into the golden armrest. His pride, his power, was slipping from him with every heartbeat. He had wanted to prove humanity weak, but now the galaxy had seen the opposite. The legend of one human was already born, and legends spread faster than fear. Daniel's chest heaved with each breath, his body close to collapse. But his eyes burned with a fire that no wound could extinguish. He looked up at the commander, meeting his golden gaze without fear. "You try to break me," he said, "but you cannot break what refuses to surrender." The words struck deeper than any blade. The arena shook not with cheers, but with the weight of silence. For silence meant the aliens could not deny him. Silence meant the truth had been planted. And silence meant that humanity had won. Daniel dropped the broken war staff to the sand. The sound echoed like thunder, final and unshakable. He turned his back on the fallen warrior, his steps slow but strong. He walked toward the gate he had entered from, his shadow long across the arena floor. The crowd watched, not with laughter, but with awe. From that day forward, no alien mocked humanity's strength. From that day, the story of one human spread across the stars. And wherever it reached, it carried a warning. The humans may bend, humans may bleed, but humans do not break. That was the truth carved into the galaxy. The truth that no laughter could erase.